So we're doing 7.26. Vedaham samatitani vartamanani charjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu vedana kaschana. Oh Arjuna, as a Supreme Person of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me, no one knows. Purport. Here the question of personality and impersonality is clearly stated. If Krishna, the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, were Maya, material, as the impersonalists consider him to be, then, like the living entity, he would change his body and forget everything about his past life. Anyone with a material body cannot remember his past life, nor can he foretell his future life, nor can he predict the outcome of his present life. Therefore, he cannot know what is happening in past, present, and future. Unless one is liberated from material contamination, he cannot know past, present, and future. Unlike the ordinary human being, Lord Krishna clearly says that he completely knows what happened in the past, what is happening in the present, and what will happen in the future. In the fourth chapter, we have seen the Lord Krishna remembers instructing Vivaswan, the sun god, millions of years ago. Krishna knows every living entity because he is situated in every living being's heart as the super soul. But despite his presence in every living entity as super soul and his presence as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the less intelligent, even if able to realize the impersonal Brahman, cannot realize Sri Krishna as the Supreme Person. Certainly, the transcendental body of Sri Krishna is not perishable. It's just like the sun, and Maya is like a cloud. In the material world, we can see that there is a sun and there are clouds and different stars and planets. The clouds may cover all these in the sky temporarily, but this covering is only apparent to our limited vision. Covering is only apparent to our limited vision means because of our limited vision, we don't seem to be able to see the clouds, see the sky, right, or the sun because of the clouds. But the reality is not that the clouds have covered the sun. The sun, moon, and stars are not actually covered, but it just appears to be. It is apparent like that. It just appears to be like that to our vision because we have a faulty vision. So actually the sun, moon, and stars are not covered. Similarly, Maya cannot cover the Supreme Lord. By his internal potency, he is not manifest to the less intelligent class of men. Nam Prakasha Sarvasya Yoga Maya Samavritam. As it is stated in the third verse of this chapter, out of millions and millions of men, some try to become perfect in this human form of light. And out of thousands and thousands of such perfect men, Kaschin Mam Veti Tattvataha, hardly one can understand what Lord Krishna is. Manushyanam Sastreshu Kaschit Yadati Siddhaye Yadataamapi Siddhanam Kaschin Mam Veti Tattvataha. Even if one is perfected by realization of impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma, he cannot possibly understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead Sri Krishna without being in Krishna consciousness. So we can understand this Brahman, Paramatma realization. They might all be very lofty goals for living entity to achieve, but even after achieving them, one cannot possibly understand Krishna without being in Krishna consciousness. And this also, I mean, the depth of Krishna consciousness also matters. So to whatever depth we have, we are Krishna conscious, which means that to whatever extent we are engaged in service of Krishna, we are absorbed in thought of Krishna, to that extent we can enter his understanding, because it's fathomless. I mean, we really cannot understand. That is why Krishna says, Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tattvataha. Now, this statement itself we can understand in multiple levels. Right? Simply understanding that Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead is one level of tattvataha. Simply knowing that he doesn't take birth like ordinary beings is one level. But then as we start going into rasa and deeper and deeper and deeper understanding of Krishna, really we understand that we can never understand him. Now, what to speak of those who are perfected impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma. People who don't want any of this impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma and who are engaged in Krishna consciousness also, depending on, like for example, Dwarkavasis. Apparently they looked at Krishna only as Paramatma. Then they didn't think about him as Supreme Lord. So there are various things like this spoken, and it bewilders really sometimes. We seem to be really fortunate, in the middle of all this, that somebody like so dear to Krishna like Srila Prabhupada has come and given us these purports. And, we are able to actually understand Krishna, but it's practically very, very difficult to understand Krishna. So we should understand we are really fortunate that we are at least going in the right direction, trying to understand Krishna as he is. And that is why Krishna says, no one knows me. But his pure devotees know him to the extent that he reveals himself to them. And then thereby we can also understand when these pure devotees reveal Krishna in their commentaries. Okay. Any questions?
Yes, Ro, I have a question. So it is mentioned that whoever has taken material birth, material body, cannot remember the old life. So does it mean that when the soul leaves the body, it immediately comes to remember what happened in past and can do in future in the interim state where soul is in the process of transmigration to another body?
Yeah, because the subtle mind is there. Mind is actually the repository of all the thoughts. But actually, what happens is when we enter a new gross body, the attachment to the gross body makes us forget the attachment to the previous body. So it's like we got something new, so we forgot the old. But mind actually has all the memories. That is why in some cases, mind brings up those memories. It's Prabhupada writes somewhere, I don't know where I read, he clearly says that it is because of the attachment to the new body that the attachment to the old body goes off, and so we forget everything about it because we're not interested in that body anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. 7.27. Ichchadvesha samuttena dvandvamohena bharata sarvabhutani sammoham sarve yanti parantapa. O sign of Bharata, O conqueror of the foe, all living entities are born into delusion, dvandva mohena, bewildered by dualities arisen from ichchadvesha. The real constitutional position of the living entity is that of subordination to the Supreme Lord, who is pure knowledge. When one is deluded into separation from this pure knowledge, he becomes controlled by the illusion energy and cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when we are separate, so Supreme Lord is pure knowledge. When we separate from this pure knowledge, then which means that we forget this pure knowledge, we become controlled by the illusory energy. And we cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead because the pure knowledge is now hidden. So that the pure knowledge has to be awakened again. The illusory energy is manifested in dualities of desire and hate. This is the most important thing actually. Everything in this material world is around desire and hate. Either we like something or we don't like something. That is why in Brahmabhuta, na sochati na kankshati. No desire, no hate. Due to desire and hate, the ignorant person wants to become one with the Supreme Lord and envies Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is also because of desire and hate. So the whole thing, the whole fall down is because of this desire and hate. Dvandva. That is why we should raise about the dualities of this material world. Pure devotees who are not deluded or contaminated by desire and hate can understand that Lord Krishna appears by his internal potencies. But those who are deluded by duality and essence think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is created by material energies. This is their misfortune. Such deluded persons symptomatically dwell in dualities of dishonor and honor, misery and happiness, woman and man, good and bad, pleasure and pain, etc., thinking this is my wife, this is my house, I'm the master of this house, and the husband of this wife. These are the dualities of delusion. Those who are so deluded by dualities are completely foolish and therefore cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why we cannot understand when we are deluded by dualities? Because even we think about the Supreme Lord also in terms of dualities. We think material, non-material, birth, death. So our whole thought process is stuck in duality. So we cannot think about something which is absolute. Duality means that there are two sides. Absolute means there's only one. So we cannot understand that. We cannot understand how Krishna is there as well as here. That seems to be like, our kind of material confusion. So we say, no, this is all too much of speculation, we say. And because it sounds similar to our world. And so we are deluded, bewildered by these dualities, nice, good and bad. Mostly, a lot of people are stuck with good and bad. This is good, this is not good. This is good, this is not good. And everything we see in terms of good and bad, which is good from a material perspective, but which is very bad from a spiritual perspective. Actually, in 11th canto of Bhagavatam, Uddhava asks this question, what is good, what is bad? Krishna says, answers briefly, and he says, thinking about good and bad is itself bad, because that binds one to this material world. So that is why when Krishna says Traigunya Vishayaveda Nistraigunya Bhavarjana, we should not even bother about the good and bad about this world. We should just be situated on the transcendental platform. That means that all activity should be just centered around Krishna and not around good, bad, nice, not nice, happiness, sadness, honor, dishonor, etc., etc. It has to be simply around Krishna, centered around Krishna. Because otherwise, we are so bewildered by dualities. Everything we tend to consider based on this principle of duality. So to raise about dualities means to simply act on the platform of Krishna, which is absolute, which means that we don't think in terms of material thought process. We just simply accept Krishna and not associate anything material to him. Like classic example is good and bad. Like Maharaj Yudhishthira said, I am not going to lie. It's not good. So no consideration. These are just for us to learn. So no consideration of good, bad. Simply everything has to be centered around Krishna. This is the secret. When I heard this actually first time, I was a bit bewildered, saying that, how do we raise above good and bad as well? Krishna also says you have to be like a guest in the house. I mean, these things are so difficult because we are attached. Sometimes we think we should do our duty. Sometimes Krishna says, raise above your duty. Don't bother about your duty, just serve me. Very difficult to understand. That is why Prabhupada says multiple places saying that one has to be under the guidance of a spiritual master, somebody who is experienced all this, who knows, who's seen the truth, and who can guide us. Otherwise, we will be deluded. We'll be bewildered. We have to raise above all every aspect of this material world, including good and bad, which seems to be the best standard to practice in material life. Be in doing good things, avoid bad things. That also we have to give up and simply associate, simply be on the platform of transcendence, serving Krishna. It is difficult because we are born into this confusion. We are born into this bewilderment. So raising above it takes time, but constant effort, mercy of Guru and Krishna, it is possible. Any questions? 28. Yesham tvantagapam gatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva mohanir mukta bhajante mam dradaprata. Persons who have acted piously in previous life and in this life, acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, not necessarily reactions. Sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So this is nishtha. So which means that people who have pious lives, which means that they don't engage in material sense gratification, they don't, or they very minimal extent engage in passion and ignorance. Very minimal, I'm saying, because if it is more, then sinful life will go on. Minimal to the extent that it is there, but it might not result in any actions, any sinful actions. And those who are not engaged in any sinful actions and who are freed from dualities of delusion, only they can engage themselves in service with determination, which means that if we have to be able to engage in Krishna's service whole day, we require a lot of determination. First of all, we should be free from desire to work, karma, desire to do karma, which mostly devotees end up in that state very soon. They get frustrated with work. So which is good. In course of time, it indicates progress. But frustration alone is not good. Attachment to Krishna is important on the other side. If somebody gets frustrated, leaves their job and then doesn't engage in Krishna consciousness, that is useless. So on one side there should be frustration, the other side there should be engagement and attachment. Engagement in Krishna's service and attachment to that service. This will happen only when we have stopped living a sinful life. That means that there are no sinful actions that we are doing. And we also raising about dualities, because we understand this whole world is full of dualities from the previous verse. Those eligible for elevation to the transcendental position are mentioned in this verse. But those who are sinful, atheistic, foolish, and deceitful, it is very difficult to transcend the duality of desire and hate. Only those who have passed their lives in practicing the regulative principles of religion and who acted piously and who have conquered sinful reactions can accept devotional service. So Prabhupada here in the purport is saying sinful reactions. In the verse translation, he said sinful actions. So how we should understand? We should understand that sinful actions will stop when sinful reactions stop. That means that till there are sinful reactions, propensity to act sinfully will also be there to some extent. Okay, so just to clear this out. We start following 4 regulative principles. That is being free from sinful life, and we stop other sinful activities like jiva himsa, etc., then if our sinful reactions are still not over, that means that our karma phala is still there, and we are affected by that karma phala. So here there are two things here. Conquered sinful reactions means that we have actually overcome karma phala. Once somebody has overcome karma phala, then that means that he doesn't have any push. This karma phala is what is pushing us to do wrong things, sinful things. So when one has conquered karma phala, then there is no push. This push is coming from our previous lives, vasana, etc., right? Which is all karma phala. So once somebody is able to capture or conquer karma phala, then there is no sinful action anyway. Okay. But even if we have not completely conquered sinful reactions, still we can, if we have been able to give up sinful actions, but we'll still suffering, because that, like, it might take some time for all sinful reactions to stop. Still they can also come to the platform of nishta. It is to engage in service with determination and gradually rise to the pure knowledge. So when Prabhupada here is saying can accept devotional service, means pure devotional service. Otherwise, even without sinful reactions going and all that, one can engage in devotional service. But this is about pure devotional service. And gradually rise to the pure knowledge of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pure knowledge. Because for the pure knowledge, one has to be pure. So once life is pure, then he engages in pure devotional service, then he gets pure knowledge of Supreme Lord. And this pure only just means not mixed, not contaminated with material thoughts, material desires, etc. Then gradually they can meditate in trance. This is very important. I can see this as in, it's not possible without being completely pure. Because if we try to sit in trance, then very next moment mind is gone somewhere. So this is very nice. Actually, see what Prabhupada has written, we'll understand after years of practice. These are all very deep statements. Initially, we cannot understand these things. So we should act piously. So first thing we should do is we should start acting piously. That means that engage in devotional service, give up nonsense activities, do only devotional service, means then that is all completely pious action. Stop sinful reactions, sinful actions. We cannot stop sinful reactions, but we can stop sinful actions. Then we accept pure devotional service. Then we engage in pure devotional service. Then over a period of time, all our sinful reactions will also get conquered. Then we get pure knowledge of Krishna. Then we can meditate in trance. Otherwise, till then we cannot enter trance, because we'll be so disturbed. Mind is going here, there. Only in that pure platform can we actually enter trance. That is the process of being situated on the spiritual platform. This elevation is possible in Krishna consciousness in association of pure devotees. For in the association of great devotees, one can be delivered from delusion. It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam that if one actually wants to be liberated, he must render service to devotees. Mahat sevan dvaram ahur vimuktehe. But one who associates with materialistic people is on the path leading to the darkest region of existence. Tamodvaram yoshitam sangi sangam. All the devotees of the Lord traverse this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from their delusion. The impersonalists do not know that forgetting their constitutional position as subordinate to the Supreme Lord is the greatest violation of God's law. Unless one is reinstated in his own constitutional position, it is not possible to understand the Supreme Personality. How to be fully engaged in his transcendental loving service with determination. So Prabhupada here is saying that it is actually Swarupa. So that is why every verse we can understand at different levels. On one level, we can understand that we just entered Nishta or Asakti. On other end platform, we can understand that, okay, maybe it's just perfection. So unless one has come to that stage, he cannot possible understand Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is true. So it can work at multiple levels. Okay.
So I have a question. You mentioned that the reaction itself can be leading to more sinful actions, right?
Yeah.
So, do you mean to say that sometimes the reaction itself fructify in the form of propensity to do sinful actions, is it, or some
No, no,
other way around?
reaction, because there is bija. So as long as there are reactions, that means we can also understand that there is bija. Propensity to do sin is also there, right?
Hmm.
Because when the sinful reactions, I mean, if so, that is one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is, if there is sinful reactions, that means that we are going to suffer. And when we suffer, we might again end up doing wrong things, because being forced, we are being pushed to suffer certain reactions, right? So we may end up in doing some more sinful actions in as a result of those sinful reactions, because we are being pushed, right? Sinful reactions basically means we are being pushed to do something. We have free will, but we have to be very strong to use our free will and get rid of sinful actions. It requires us to be very strong. So if you have made sufficient progress in Krishna consciousness, then sinful reactions will not result in more sinful actions, because we will then control our mind, shama, dama, everything, and then we will still try to steer more towards Krishna when we are in the midst of these pushings. So definitely when there are sinful reactions, there is propensity to do sinful action will be there generally.
Yeah. So sometimes the sinful reactions itself might take a whole lifetime to clear, right? And also Prabhupada has written in the translation in the first line, persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in
Hmm.
this life. So
Hmm.
is Prabhupada indicating that sometimes this is not a phenomenon of one life? Because so if, for example, I take several devotees case, or let's say my case,
Hmm.
I'm not sure if I have acted piously in my previous life, but in this life, at least before coming to Krishna consciousness, I have acted impiously, right? So then how to understand this part? That is it an indication that normally it's a couple of lifetimes where this propensity to do sinful action reduces, or like how is the proper understanding here?
No, no, no. Here it's more than sinful actions. It is pious life. See, we should understand one thing. Unfortunately, in Kali Yuga, these things coexist. So somebody might be doing pious things and at the same time doing impious things. So here the focus is more on that the person has been acting piously, which means that he's done some good stuff. He's done some bhakti unmukha sukruti, some punya. So he's slightly moving. Say one might be very sinful, then slowly we are moving more towards piety, piety, piety. Right? So sinful actions are also there, but they are reducing.
Okay.
So when pious content increases to such an extent that impiety cannot stand at all, then sinful actions will completely be eradicated. But the whole point is Jana Sukrutino Arjuna. Basically, that's what we have to go back to, right? Chaturvida bhajante mam Jana Sukrutino Arjuna. Who come to Krishna who are Sukrutis. This is that Sukruti, this acted piously. So then we will come to Krishna. Right? If you are Dushkruti, that means that majority is actually sin. Piety will be very less percentage of piety. Then we will not surrender to Krishna. So this just means that there is sufficient Sukruti balance that we can come to Krishna under different circumstances.
Okay. So not necessarily that we have entirely done pious only and not any
No,
part
no,
of
no, no,
that.
no.
That is not.
No, then we
Yeah.
will. Then it's a different. That's also possible in the sense like Kali Yuga very difficult, but somebody heavily in Sattva Guna, they'll still have some traces of sins will be there, because in Kali Yuga it's very difficult to remain sinless unless one is a devotee. Even if one is a devotee, might end up, but Krishna just forgives all those unintentional sins. But it's generally very difficult. But yeah, if somebody is completely perfectly situated in Sattva-guna, it could be that he's not engaging in any sinful actions. It's possible. But no guarantee that he's going to be engaged in devotional service, because he might just be interested in material welfare.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. Maybe these verses are very high. I don't know if everybody is able to understand.
I have a small question.
Yeah, Gaurav, bro.
In the previous verse, you're mentioning we need to come beyond good or and bad, right?
Yeah.
And I just have this confusion. So, what is the difference between that bad and the sinful life you're talking here? So,
Yeah, bad is sinful life. Bad is sinful life, but bad might just be like not harmful also. Like, for example, just say, for example, somebody is like behind cleanliness, right? They want everything spick and span. Now, in their eyes, unclean is bad. No, but unclean is not really sinful, right? But for them, it is bad. It's not acceptable. So then they will see something and say, oh, this is not clean. So their focus is always on anything and everything they see. This is clean, this is not clean, this is clean, this is not clean. They cannot become Krishna conscious, right? As in, they have to raise above that. But the sin is really doing something which is not accepted by Shastra. Definitely it will come under bad, but there are other things under bad which need not be sinful.
okay. So bad, if it comes within the jurisdiction of harming someone or within the Shastras, it's sinful. Like, for example, there might be something if, so Prabhupada says if we'll have to throw bombs or protect dharma, we should be able to do it. But that also would fall under, some people would see that as sinful. So
No, but that is just lack of proper vision. No, dharma samsthapanarthaya cannot be seen as sinful, right? Provided the right person is giving that direction for that this is dharma and this has to be established. Whimsically, we can, if we decide something, then it might be adharma, right?
Okay.
But the important point about that good and bad is basically we should not get stuck at any level, any kind of material thing. It might seem the best from a material perspective, still it will bind us. We have to transcend even that to come to Krishna consciousness. That was the message.
Okay. Yeah.
Jara marana mokshaya mamashritya yatanti ye te brahma tad viduh kritsnam adhyatmam karma chakilam. The last one more is there. Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They're actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. But that old age and disease affect this material body, but not the spiritual body. So we should know that we have a spiritual body. There's no birth, death, old age, and disease for the spiritual body. So one who attains the spiritual body becomes one of the associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engages in eternal devotional service. Becomes one of the associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engages in eternal devotional service. One who attains, okay. And who attains the spiritual body and engages in eternal devotional service is really liberated. Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit. It is said that one should understand that he is Brahman, spirit soul. This Brahman conception of life is also in devotional service as described in this verse. The pure devotees are transcendently situated on Brahman platform and they know everything about transcendental activities. Four kinds of impure devotees who engage themselves in the transcendental service of the Lord achieve their respective goals, and by the grace of the Supreme Lord, when they are fully Krishna conscious, they actually enjoy spiritual association with the Supreme Lord. Perfection. But those who are worshippers of demigods never reach the Supreme Lord in the Supreme Planet. Even the less intelligent Brahman realized persons cannot reach the Supreme Planet known as Goloka Vrindavan. Only persons who perform activities in Krishna consciousness, Mam Ashritya, taking shelter of me, are actually entitled to be called Brahman. because they're actually endeavoring to reach the Krishna planet. Such persons have no misgivings about Krishna, no confusion, and thus they are factually Brahman. Those who are engaged in worshipping the form of Archa or Archa of the Lord, or who engage in meditation on the Lord simply for liberation from material bondage, also know by the grace of the Lord the purports of Brahman, Adibhuta, etc., as explained by the Lord later, by the Lord in the next chapter. So even Brahmabhuta, those who are engaged in Archa, in worshipping the Lord in the deity form, and in meditation of the Lord simply for liberation, they also know by the grace of the Lord purports of Brahman. That is basically Brahmabhuta stage. Anyway, so main point here is intelligent persons take refuge in devotional service. Take refuge in Krishna in devotional service. And because they've taken shelter of devotional service, they're actually Brahman. Which again, here it means pure devotional service. So this is Brahmabhuta, because when we come to that Brahmabhuta stage, we get pure devotional service. And then they know everything about transcendental activities. So the important part is Mam Ashritya, taking shelter of Krishna in Krishna consciousness. Okay, last verse. Sadhibhuta daivam mam sadhi yagnam cha ye viduhu prayana kale pichamam te viduryukta chetasaha. Those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and of all the methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, Supreme Personality Godhead, even at the time of death. Adibhuta is governing principle of material manifestation. Adi Daiva is governing of all demigods, and Adi Yagna is governing all sacrifices. So creation, maintenance, governing of all demigods, and governing all sacrifices. So these two are maintenance, this is creation. Persons acting in Krishna consciousness are never deviated from the path of entirely understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Are never deviated. That means that they're on the path and it will take time, but sometime they will realize. In the transcendental association of Krishna consciousness, one can understand how the Supreme Lord is the governing principle of the material manifestation, even of the demigods. This we understand. How in transcendental association means when we hear about Krishna's position, we can understand this. Gradually, by such transcendental association, one becomes convinced of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the time of death, such a Krishna conscious person can never forget Krishna. Naturally, he is thus promoted to the planet Goloka Vrindavan. That's all. So this 7th chapter particularly explains how one can become a fully Krishna conscious person. The beginning of Krishna consciousness is the association of persons who are Krishna conscious. So such association is spiritual and puts one indirectly in touch with the Supreme Lord. So importance of association. And by his grace, one can understand Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By the Lord's grace only we can understand. At the same time, one can really understand the constitutional position of living entity and how the living entity forgets Krishna and becomes entangled in material activity. So we can understand this also, that we are stuck here. And we can also understand that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. By gradual development of Krishna consciousness in good association, the living entity can understand that due to forgetfulness, he has become conditioned. He can also understand that the human form of life is an opportunity to regain consciousness and that it should be fully utilized to attain the causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord. Many subjects have been discussed in this chapter: man in distress, inquisitive, man in want of material necessities, knowledge of Brahman, knowledge of Paramatma, liberation from birth, death, and diseases, and worship of the Supreme Lord. However, he who is actually elevated in Krishna consciousness does not care for the different process. He simply directly engages himself in activities of Krishna consciousness, and thereby factually attains his constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Lord Krishna. In such a situation, he takes pleasure in hearing and glorifying the Supreme Lord in pure devotional service. He is convinced that by doing so, all his objectives will be fulfilled. Vyavasayatmika buddhi. This determined faith is called Dridhavrata, and it is the beginning of Bhakti Yoga. See, Dridhavrata, firm determination is the beginning. We say Ado Shraddha, but actually that Komal Shraddha is not good enough. We have to have Dridha Shraddha. That is the beginning of Bhakti Yoga, transcendental, loving service. See, Bhakti Yoga means loving service. That is the verdict of all scriptures. This seventh chapter is the substance of that conviction. This we end the seventh chapter. And so yeah, so seventh chapter discusses all these topics, and it comes to devotional service, saying full conscious of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord. So let's just see the flow of this. So from here, verse 16, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service. Others do not surrender. So surrender amongst them is the Gnani. Then there is discussion about demigods, that is given by Krishna. And then Krishna also derides the Nirakaravadis. And he says that I'm never manifest to such people. And then he says, I know everything. No one knows me. Everybody is born into realities. And only those who have been pious and whose sinful reactions are stopped, they engage in my service. And they're actually Brahman. And they come to me. They know me even at the time of death. Okay. Little bit study is required because it's not very easily connectable. Various topics being discussed, so maybe more reading is required. Because Krishna talks about those who surrender, Krishna talks about demigod worshippers, those who don't surrender. He also talks about Nirakaravadis who don't completely surrender. And then say, I'm very difficult to understand because everybody is born into illusion. But persons who have acted piously, they engage in my service. They can understand me. Otherwise, nobody can understand. These chapters are very important. Middle 6. Okay. Anybody has any questions? Okay. No questions means yes or no true. You have anything to say?
Bhagavad Gita is like a preliminary stage, but it's very, very tough. Even though I understand a couple of times gone through Srimad Bhagavatam also, I think it is looks tough only. Because each chapter it's like a hyperbola, not hyper, it will go in beginning with so then it will become very exponential way.
Yeah, I mean, more and more we make progress, we'll be able to understand more better. Actually, Bhagavad Gita complicated because we don't understand Krishna's thought process. That is why actually at one point of time we should read Sharartha Varsini, like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Bhagavad Gita, where he somewhat helps us to understand the connection between verses. Because there are 2 levels of complication. One is verse itself, we might not be able to understand, but if we study deeply, it's not very difficult to understand the verse per se. But why Krishna is saying this in connection with the previous verse or the next verse is more difficult to understand. When we are able to understand that, then
very huge gap. First verse actually it will go exponentially. Lot of understanding.
At verse level, but verse level it's still okay because there is purport. Yeah, but some aspects we might not be able to completely understand. But connection between verses is very difficult. That takes, that'll take us a whole lifetime. Very difficult. So many years I spent to simply understand second chapter. After that, I have not moved further at all. I just stopped because second chapter itself was so complex that it took many years to understand. Even after reading Acharya's commentary, Prabhupada's purports multiple times. Some little, now there's little bit understanding of second chapter, but then, other chapters. Yeah, so Bhagavad Gita is a lifelong study. But see, the important thing is that, see, we have come to the conclusion, though we are not able to understand the details, but we have come to the conclusion, right? We are engaging in devotional service. We are developing love for Krishna. We are trying to serve him with, with feeling. All this we are trying to do on one side. That is what is going to take us. It is not, see, all this knowledge will actually eventually manifest in us before perfection, at the time of perfection. All this knowledge will manifest. We'll exactly understand what Krishna is saying in all these things, etc. Because that will happen by the mercy of Krishna. So we don't have to think that unless I come to that level of understanding, I cannot achieve Krishna. No. That has nothing to do. This is just, it's like, broken words of a small child. And that's all that we are trying to just, with our tiny brains, we are just trying to understand some of these things. But luckily, thankfully, we have come to the conclusion. So we don't have to worry whether we are going to completely understand this. Not mostly we might not be able to understand completely. But because we are trying to serve Krishna, it will compensate. And Krishna will give the intelligence required to go to him. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. So, and in that buddhi yogam, in the path where he is guiding us, it's not required that we understand all the details of these technical details. You might not be able to understand everything, but he will give the absolute mandatory knowledge that is required to bring us to him. And then when actual realization, self-realization happens, that means at the stage of prema, when Krishna, full knowledge, Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana is revealed to us, like exactly we will understand what Krishna is telling in these verses, etc. But that's just before we, stage of perfection. So which means that even without knowing all this perfectly well, we can still achieve perfection. So that should not discourage us.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay. We'll stop then. So we have finished 7 chapters. We'll continue with 8. Anchakalpatrubhyascha kripasindhubhyo cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha samaveta gaurava. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.